Okay, welcome to Unit 5, Video 4. Last time I said we were going to get to 2 unintended consequences in this video. It turns out we're only going to do 1 to keep the video a little bit shorter and more focused. And then we'll do the next one in the next video. Okay, so the short answer to this is the unintended consequence. So first of all, socialization is this process of brainwashing in order to get some method, some mechanism for social control inside of individuals. That mechanism is a conscience, and all of our consciences bear a pretty big overlap with each other. That is the point. That is what socialization is designed to do. What we're talking about today is an unintended consequence of it. It is an inevitable consequence, but it's not the point. And that unintended consequence is that you develop a personality. Your personality. And by that, I don't mean something, some sociological alternate definition. Personality is your habitual way of conducting yourself. What I'm saying is that is a result of socialization. So how does it happen? The guy we need to go to today is Sigmund Freud. And I don't love going to Sigmund Freud because there are very legitimate problems with him in terms of how he... well, first of all, in terms of his crazy psychosexual development thing, but also in terms of his minimizing the experiences of women when they had experienced trauma, especially sexual trauma in their lives. Sigmund Freud is not a universally wonderful character, and I'm not trying to say that he is. However, he did make other contributions that were positive, and one of them was the book, which is more of a sociological book than a psychological book. It's called Civilization and Its Discontents. Last time I told you that if you ever have to read Emile Durkheim, just read the introduction and conclusion. You'll get everything you need there because the rest of it is just horrific writing. Sigmund Freud is a really good writer who wrote very, very small books, and as long as you are kind of dealing with the stuff that doesn't deal with sexuality or gender issues, he was a thoughtful person who came up with some pretty interesting ways of understanding what was going on with people. Importantly, note that the idea of this book, his main thesis in it, is that to be a person in civilization is to be miserable in some way. That's an important thing to understand. And right now, what we're going to use is that sort of formula for dealing with how personality is an inevitable unintended consequence of socialization. So this is basically, it's a very simple equation. You get an individual to begin with, and individuals are unique. We are malleable, which is why you see us largely behaving in very, very patterned ways. We're very malleable, but that doesn't mean that we are all clones of each other. We sometimes look like we are, but there's a lot going on under the hood that is individual. Freud's term for this, for the sort of individual essence that people had, is called the id. ID, but it's pronounced id. And so Freud said what you have in the beginning is, and to be clear, Freud isn't making the argument that you should get rid of society, because, I mean, what happens if you have an individual who is not socialized, who is just pure id? First of all, they're a baby. They don't survive. Second of all, somebody who is completely just gives into any, like, conscienceless impulses is going to be a mess for anybody who lives around them. So he's not saying we should all go back to pre-civilized times. He's saying just like, this is reality, do your best within it. He's kind of showing you the water that we live in. So anyway, you've got individuals who have an id. I have an id, you have an id. It is that uniqueness that is in you, that whatever that creativity that takes you in a particular direction, and curiosity that is in a particular direction, and affinities that are in particular directions. it's not always easy to find out what that is that's truly you, because I mean, most of us start getting socialized at the point at which we are born, so society's influencing us right away. But nonetheless, there is, at least Freud postulates, this sort of uniqueness to you. What happens is you then get socialized. You run into society. His term for society is the superego. And what you want to think of this as, and what it really is, he defines it very similarly to the way Emile Durkheim defines the collective consciousness. It is this sort of understanding of right and wrong that exists. Some people liken this idea as the id is, this is a little harsh. It's not a perfect metaphor, but it's worth thinking about. You have the the devil on one shoulder, which is the id. The id wants things. It wants to be happy. It wants to be satisfied. It is impulses. The angel on the other side is the collective consciousness, or the superego, which is saying, no, there's a right and a wrong. You can't just do what you want to do. And those two things are battling themselves out inside of us. The resolution of that, which is going to be unique for all of us, because even though we all have the same superego, we all have the same collective consciousness, we start from different ids. So you and I probably overlap almost 100% in terms of our conscience. But I have impulses, I have an innate Christness that's different than your innate you-ness. So when you're adding these two things together, we're each going to end up with something slightly different. That slightly different thing is our personalities. This is why you'll have other sociology teachers or other teachers in a general way, who will do the same stuff that I'm doing, writing on a board, explaining things to you, but I will do it with my personality. They will do it with their personality. And that's a good way of kind of remembering an example of this in real time. Freud's term for this, you've got your id plus your superego, and it adds up to your ego. Ego, in this sense, doesn't mean your like self-absorption. It just means your personality. That's what we've got. Freud, and what you can see here is why this would be inevitable. That an inevitable unintended consequence. Society wants you to have this. This is important. You need to be under control. You need to be brainwashed. But in the process of brainwashing, what you're doing is you're making a person not be pure id. They can't be and have this. So what you end up with is this inevitable process of creating a personality. I have two last points to make in this. First of all, when you take that ego, so your personality, I have one more equation that I need to put up here really quickly. And in fact, I'll put it down here because it's not a rehashing of this. It's more a different, it shows it exemplifies it is the formula for the example I just gave of me as a teacher. If you take me as a personality, and you put me into the status of teacher. We don't want teacher, we want status here, because this would be the case in any status. Jeez Louise. Status. You take those two things, and I act out this status. I'm using the same norms that all of your teachers do, but I act it out in a slightly different way. What that is the status, the norms associated with the status, plus my personality, and the term for this sociologically is role performance. If you had a question before about why, if we all have the same norms and the same status, why do you have some students who are super attentive and ask a lot of questions and other students who tend to drift off into daydreams, and other ones who are quietly diligent. Why do you have that? Well, it's because they're starting from different personalities. They play the same, they have the same status, so they have the same norms, but there are different ways that you can perform it. That's called role performance. Okay, last deep point for this. And this is a creepy deep point, so sorry, we get a lot of that in Unit 5. You can see, you take my id plus America's superego, and you end up with this personality for what it's, for good and for bad. The implication here is that my personality, my habitual way of conducting myself would be different if I were raised in a different society. I would have some resemblance to this personality because, again, we're starting from the same material. But that material is going to be shaped in a different way by the superego of a different society, or the collective conscience of a different society. So this personality, this way that I am, there are two things about this. First of all, it's kind of trippy to think about the fact that I would be a different person. My personality would be different if I was in a different society. The other thing to think about there is, when I use that example, I always tend to think about, well, what would it have been like if I were in a horrible society that was, more extremely racist or sexist or classist or whatever. But the other side of it is, what would my personality have been like if I were raised in a society that was completely egalitarian, that treated men and women completely the same, that said, when you see a person who is poor, you should reach out to them. You don't step over them because they're in the gutter. You step toward them and help them. What if that was the superego? How would I be then? And at that point, and this is beyond the scope of the class, but it's worth considering. If you could change things about your personality, if you could think, what would have been the ideal society for me to be raised in? What would my personality be like? Remember, the only reason that it wasn't that way was dumb luck. The dumb luck of being born into the society that you were born into. Which means, if you want to take matters into your own hands and re-socialize yourself, as though you were in a society that agreed with the way you think the world should work, who's going to know if you do that? And it might be worth doing in terms of your own happiness. Okay, that's a brief foray into Uncle Chris instead of the teacher Chris. Unintended consequence, to wrap it up, unintended consequence number 1, you get a personality out of this. Remember, that's not the point of socialization. It's an unintended consequence. I'll be back with another one in the next video. See you guys then.